Hello, welcome to my Physiology Fun Day project on bats, COVID-19 edition. Now, before we get started, I wanted to apologize in advance for any technical errors. I'm simply trying to do my best, just like everyone else right now. To get started, let's talk about some cool bat facts, because bats are incredibly amazing and cool species. In fact, did you know that bats are the only flying mammals on Earth? While other species, such as the flying squirrel, they glide, they don't actually fly. Another cool fact about bats is that they are one of the few animals capable of echolocation. Other species include dolphins, whales, and various types of birds, but bats are one of the few, and that makes them pretty cool in my opinion. Another fun fact is that baby bats are called pups. I always find this really cute. I love looking up the name of baby animals. Really cool trivia facts as well. Bats are also an incredibly diverse species. While some bats will migrate to warmer regions in the winters, others will go into hibernation, or more specifically, as we talked about in class, they actually go into torpor. The largest bats on Earth, which are called the giant golden-crowned flying fox, as if that's not a prestigious enough name, have a wingspan of over 1.7 meters, which, to be honest, is slightly terrifying, but they are huge, and you should look up some videos of them because they're really awe-inspiring. They're beautiful. In contrast, the smallest bat, which is called the bumblebee bat, has a wingspan of only 170 millimeters. Millimeters! They're so tiny. And one of the reasons they got their name is because they're so small, people often mistake the sound of them flying by as just being the buzz of a bumblebee. That's how small they are. So obviously they are really cool. They're flying mammals that can use echolocation. Some hibernate, some migrate, and they're also so diverse in size. But not only are they cool, they are also useful to us, as in useful to humans. And why is this? Bats are pollinators, and pollinators are something that need a lot of help right now. Obviously, we caused a lot of destruction in that area with the bees and carbon dioxide and such, but bats are actually a pollinator as well. They are more prevalent to act as common pollinators in the tropical and desert climates because they can survive those. So not really what we see here in Michigan, although they still are there. They're just not the primary pollinators in Michigan. Also, bats are hungry insectivores. So of the nearly all of the 13,000 plus bat species on Earth, they almost all rely on insects for their diet. On average, a single bat can eat between 6,000 to 800 bugs or 8,000 bugs a night. That is a lot of mosquitoes and gnats and all those other annoying bugs you hate in the summers. So bats are kind of nice. They eat those, they get rid of them, makes it a lot nicer for us. And lastly, it is estimated that bats save the agricultural industry over $3 billion each year. So this statistic, I actually have some other ones that conflict with it. Some say they save up to $58 billion, so wow, that's obviously a big gap in money, but I thought I'd go with the low one because I don't want to overestimate it, but it's at least $3 billion, which is still a lot, and that's because, again, they're eating the little insects that maybe would eat up the corn or the wheat or other cash crops. Bats are hungry, they will eat them, which in turn means the bugs can't eat the crops. But despite all their coolness, bats have their problems too, and one of them are myths. So one common myth is probably something we all say. I know I say it, and it's that bats are, that phrase, you're as blind as a bat. Well, bats can actually see just fine, just well. They do use echolocation to pinpoint exactly where their prey is, but they still can see, and that's a common misconception. Another myth about bats is the whole vampire thing. If they bite you, you'll turn into Dracula or whatever that one is. But of only 3 of the thousands of bat species actually feed on blood, and all of these 3 live in Latin America, so the odds of us running into them are thin. But even if you do want to go on vacation, you should know that of these 3 species, only 1 target mammals, and they are far more likely to go after a cattle than you. Think about it. What are you going to feed off of? The human who can swat you off, or the cattle who can't? And just another fun fact, bats don't actually suck blood. They kind of lick it up like milk, which is kind of interesting. And probably a little disturbing, but fun fact. The next myth is that all bats have rabies. Now, this is a common myth across lots of species, but just like in lots of species, not all dogs have rabies, not all bats have rabies. According to the CDC, only 5% to 6% of bats have rabies, so that's not something you have to worry about, really. It's not like you're going to die, and not like they're all going to infect you or whatever. And the last myth I have on here is the bat hair day. So this is something my mom used to say growing up as well. I really don't understand how this myth got started, but there's the idea that bats will fly into your hair to nest there. Well, there's several issues with this myth. Well, first off, bats don't build nests, so they certainly aren't going to go fly in your hair to do this. So this one really has no basis at all. I'm not sure how it came about, but it's just not true, period. As if that wasn't enough, bats still are facing other issues, and this is in the form of diseases. Just like humans get diseases, bats get diseases. And one that they are facing currently is called white nose syndrome. I learned about it last summer when I went to Carlsbad National Caverns. So what is white nose syndrome? It's a fungal disease that is killing thousands of bats worldwide. It's where a white fungus will grow on patches of skin that don't have fur, which is commonly like the nose or the ears, that kind of thing, which is how the disease kind of got its name. And so when bats hibernate over winter, they go into torpor to save energy. However, this fungus that is on like their ears and their nose is kind of itchy and uncomfortable. So bats will use energy stores to come out of torpor in order to try to like relieve the itch, the tension kind of thing. But why is this an issue? Well, when bats come out of torpor, it's still winter. Due to this, it is cold. It's too cold for the bats to go hunting outside. There's no bugs. So they have no choice but to kind of go back into torpor. So they use energy to come out of it, and they have to use more energy to go back into this. So if this happens several times throughout the winter, the bat's energy stores become thoroughly exhausted, depleted, and oftentimes if this happens before spring comes around, the bat will end up dying because it doesn't have enough energy. So torpor is supposed to be a process where you save energy. Well, that only works if you're only really going in or out of it once or twice. You're not meant to keep coming out of it and going back in. And so, unfortunately, we have a lot of bats dying because of that. Lastly, I threw this in here because it's very relevant. The last issue that bats are facing are involving our current COVID-19 pandemic. So Franklin D. Roosevelt once said that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Unfortunately, when we fear something, we tend to act irrationally, and some of that's going on right now, and that's because the COVID-19 pandemic is believed to have originated in bats. So it was a virus in bats that transcended and mutated, and now it's susceptible to humans as well. And there has been some pretty horrific outcomes of this. There are actually people in China and other countries who are suggesting the mass slaughter of hibernating bat colonies, which is really just unfortunate and sad. Earlier I was listing all the things that bats actually do for us, and yet these people are suggesting that we should go out and kill all the bats. And it has happened in some of the cities already. There's like city bat houses that you never really notice unless you look for them. And people are taking them down and actually killing the bats in them, which is really, really sad. So please do not blame the bats. We don't kill all the cows because some of them could possibly give us mad cow disease. And we don't kill all the dogs because some of them could give us rabies. So it's kind of along the same line. Yes, this was really unfortunate. It is unfortunate. It's causing a lot of mishap worldwide, but that doesn't mean we should exterminate bats. So obviously bats are fighting their own battles right now, but how can we help them? Well, one way to help is to be a bat ambassador. What do I mean by this? Well, you have just been informed of the truth. When you hear people spreading myths, or even recently with the COVID-19, stand up. Tell them what you know. If you hear people saying, oh, all bats have rabies, no, correct them. If you hear people saying we should remove bat houses because COVID-19, no, correct them. That isn't right. That's not going to help anyone. It's actually probably going to hurt everyone. Another way to help bats is to not disturb them. This is especially in the winter with the hibernating colonies. Again, this is the same effect as the white nose syndrome, right? We don't want to be taking them out of torpor and making them go back in and exhausting all that energy. Another thing is to limit pesticide use. This is just to help create a more healthy environment for bats to live. If you use a lot of pesticides in the area, the bats won't go there, and you want bats in the areas, right, because they help clean up the bug population. Another thing you can do is leave up old and dying trees. Humans have a tendency to see those cool hollowed out trees in the forest and we're like, oh, we'll cut them down and make room for new ones. But everything in nature has a purpose, and these old trees are used by lots of species, not just bats. Owls are a big one, and hawks, and a lot of different kind of species use them either for housing or maybe they eat them. And so leave those up. You know, if it's not in the way, it's not threatening your house, leave it up. And the last way I have listed here on how to help bats is to make a bat house, which kind of gets to my part of the project today. So, Project Bat House, the general guidelines. So I got my guidelines from the U.S. Forest Service, though there are many out there. This was free, and so I like free as a college student. And some of the general guidelines they gave is the necessary dimensions. It must be at least 24 inches tall, 14 inches wide, and 3 to 4 inches deep. And this is important just so it has a large enough space so the bats feel comfortable. Another thing is the wood thickness. So in Michigan especially, we have some bat populations that hibernate and we have some that migrate. But for those hibernating ones especially, they gotta stay warm in the winter. So they recommend at least 3/4 of an inch to an inch or, larger, I imagine, pieces of wood to use, and that way you just keep it insulated against the cold. Another thing you must have in your bat house is an air vent. So since these are so large, you usually put an air vent about halfway up just so you can get some fresh air in there. Don't suffocate in there, right? We want to keep it nice and clean. Another feature of the bat house you should have in there is a grip. And so what do I mean by grip? It means something that the bats can use to climb up into the bat house, and this is usually done in the form of actually digging notches into the wood so they can kind of climb it like a ladder, or you can put in a plastic mesh and that will also act the same. They can climb up it. And this must cover the entirety of the inside of the house so they can choose to hang and roost wherever they want to. Some other guidelines is the number of chambers. So multiple chambers are better. They're also harder to make, but they're better because for multiple reasons. One, that you can house more bats, have a bigger bat colony, and the other is that especially for those hibernating bats, they're better at regulating the heat for the long winters. Second to last kind of guideline for bat houses is to have a landing area. And what I mean by this is that bats are very agile when they fly. However, sometimes it's hard to kind of swoop up into the box. So you want to have a place for them to land on the outside of the box and then they can crawl up inside, and I'll show you that in just a minute. And lastly is the color. Again, you're going to want that to be black, dark, so retaining the heat, right? Especially for those hibernating bats. So also, if you want the U.S. Forest Service official PDF instructions on how to build a bat house, just email me at my email there, and I'll be happy to send it to you. So this is my bat house. try to keep this as steady as I can. And so you can see it's quite large. I followed the recommended guidelines, and I'll kind of point out some of the features I have on here. So one thing is this is the air vent, so that way some fresh air can come in and they can kind of get some fresh breath of air. So this, I haven't nailed it down yet, so you can kind of see inside, which is cool. So on the inside you have the mesh netting. As you can see, that goes all the way up, and it's just hammered down into there, and they can climb up into it. So I didn't have the tools to build notches, so I just bought some plastic gutter mesh, and it's worked just as well. Another cool feature, obviously you can see the color, so that works. Mine is only one chamber, but you can build multiple chamber ones, and those will probably be better. I'm not really sure how to show this. I'm just gonna... Again, I was saying I haven't nailed it down. It's because of the COVID-19 pandemic. I can't go to my uncle's to get his tools. But as soon as this is over, this will all be put together. Yeah. All right. So now that we have seen what the house will look like, sort of the finished product, unfortunately it's not quite there yet. Once you have it done, you're going to have some general guidelines to follow when you try to put it up outside, and some of these guidelines on the location involve how high it is off the ground. It should be 15 to 20 feet, and this is just so you can avoid some of those ground predators, and also bats like it up high, right? Think about it, bats in cages, caves and such, they don't roost on the ground. It requires 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight, so they recommend south or east facing. This is again just for that heat retention. You should install it away from bright artificial lights. One of the reasons why bat houses are often unsuccessful is because people will put them on a light pole or on the back porch by the porch light. And bats don't want to have a bright light glaring into their house, would you? No. Another thing you should have nearby your bat house is a water source location. It should be within a quarter mile even. For Michigan, this isn't as big of a deal. We have lots of ponds and stuff nearby, rivers, streams, but just make sure you have one nearby. Another thing, you want to make sure you have no objects blocking the entrance of your bat house. This one's kind of obvious, right? You don't want branches blocking it. It makes it hard for the bats to find it. And lastly, for best results, they recommend installing it in early spring if you want to have a summer bat population. It looks like I'm going to miss that deadline this year due to the pandemic, but I'll still hang it up, and hopefully then by next summer I'll have a good population. So thank you. Thank you for coming to my presentation. I hope you learned some fun new facts and that you leave this presentation knowing more than what you came in with.